One of the most frequently asked questions that I get is how do you inflate your tires using a CO2 cartridge? You shouldn't be using your CO2 cartridge inflator for the first time when you've actually got an emergency. You should learn how to use your CO2 inflator at home, at leisure, when you've got plenty of alternative ways of inflating your tire. Remember, CO2 cartridges are a one-shot deal. Once you've exhausted the CO2 from the cartridge, that's it. You can't refill the cartridge and you can't inflate your tire. So you have one shot at getting this right. So make sure you practice. Don't be surprised by how your CO2 inflator actually works. A 16-gram CO2 cartridge will deliver the correct amount of pressure in a road bike that will allow you to get home safely, and in a mountain bike tire that will allow you to continue your ride. Now that's only the case if you get all the CO2 from this cartridge into your tire. Any amount that leaks out in the process of connecting this to the valve on your inflator or the valve on your tire will result in considerably lower pressure in your tire. So that's the trick. You want to make sure that you understand how to seat the CO2 cartridge into the valve and the valve onto your tire valve. In CO2 inflator valves that have a shutoff on them, make sure that you understand which way to turn the mechanism in order to shut it off or to open up the valve to allow CO2 to flow. The simple solution is turn the valve all the way in the clockwise position, which will usually, but not always, shut off the flow of CO2. Place the end of the valve that goes onto your CO2 cartridge in your mouth and blow through it and determine whether air is coming through the other end, which would go on your tire valve. Nothing is flowing, so that's the shutoff setting. Okay, turn it counterclockwise and blow. And that's the open position. Now that you know that, start by closing the valve so that when you connect it to your tire and inflate it, it's not going to leak. For practice purposes, make sure that your tire is deflated. Make sure that there is no air pressure inside your tire. Remember that CO2 cartridges are pre-measured. They will bring your tires up to the correct pressure provided you're starting from a flat tire. Make sure that the flow valve on the CO2 inflator is in the closed position, turned all the way clockwise in this case, and then make sure that the valve is seated on the tire valve, and then thread the cartridge into the inflator. At some point, the cartridge will be punctured by a little pin inside the inflator and allow the CO2 to flow through the inflator. Make sure that it's nice and tight. At that point, a little bit of CO2 may leak out. At this point, make sure that the CO2 inflator is seated correctly on the tire. Bear in mind that the cartridge will get incredibly cold as the CO2 expands, causing a refrigeration effect. And then simply open the valve on the inflator very carefully in order to allow the CO2 to flow into the tire. And you can see the refrigeration effect taking hold as the CO2 goes from the cartridge into the valve of the tire and inflates the tire to maximum pressure. This will take about 30 seconds. And you'll feel the tire up to full pressure at this point. Close the valve and remove the inflator from the tire. Press the seal, and you're ready to go. It's that simple. Once your cartridges have been spent, dispose of them in an environmentally responsible way. Try to ensure that they're recycled correctly. For more information, be sure to refer to our other videos. Flat Tire Part 3, which explains how to repair your flat tire, and Flat Tire Part 2, which explains how to remove and install your wheels. So go out there and have a great ride.